So let's move on to Trump impeachment and acquittal. The curious case of the Trump impeachments, Trump acquittal. This is deja vu all over again. I think Yogi Berra said that. Had a pretty triumphant letter from the president the other day. He seemed pretty upbeat in that letter. It's funny, he has no platform, and yet it was shared all over the place. He had no problem getting his message out on all the places he's been banned. But we had 7 Republicans that vote yes for this. You know, it's all basically the same cast of rhino dipshits who are largely irrelevant at this point. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of these people start to retire, because I think they just sort of sign their own death warrant. They're all going to get primaried to some degree or another.
They are, but right now I wish that I could agree. I should warn you that I'm so black-pilled on politics right now that I am the worst person to talk to. Like, I am just wretchedly black-pilled.
So you're gonna out cynic Gen X.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
No, but the sad thing about this is that they are not irrelevant. They're actually, they know damn well that they're perfectly able to do that. They can be censured all day long by their parties, which they will be. Every single GOP, state GOP party back in wherever they're from is going to vote, and they're going to kick and scream and throw up a lot of dirt, but it won't matter. Just like it didn't matter that Liz Cheney's not stupid. She did what she did because she knew she could get away with it.
Yep, that's true.
She's that afraid of being primaried. She knows she's going to be primaried. Imagine what that disgusting family is going to whip out against whoever primaries her properly. And I mean, we've got some folks in the wings that are planning on doing that are going to be very, very, very interesting if the folks that I know about actually end up doing it. But anyways, all of that to say, yes, we have to primary these people. We have to punish them. We've got to get rid of this shit GOP the way we have it. But none of that's really going to happen while we have the RNC that we have. The power is in the money, and the money is not in our hands.
Mm-hmm. And they're kind of like to your point about the 7 that we talked about, and there's others, like, you know, they're lampreys. They're really hooked in, and it's hard to pull them off. And they do have so much money and so much influence. I wanted to say about I saw the video of one of Trump's lawyers. You guys probably saw that. It was pretty good. He just crushed that woman. And it is a good question and this is something I've talked to, I have members of the left in my family, and I love them. And I always tell them this. I said, example for this, first of all, the trial was bullshit. We knew it was bullshit. They weren't even doing it right. But if you're going to do that, at what point I would ask a left-wing person, at what point is tampering of evidence, is there too much of that? Like what amount of tampering of evidence is okay to get what you want?
Oh, they just switched some dates. That's all they did.
Or as I talked to other people too, I said, how many illegal aliens is enough? Yep. How many illegal aliens? Like what is?
How much voter fraud is enough?
Right. How much? Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, the election wasn't coordinated, stolen. Okay, great. We know there's a lot of cities which are the hubs of states, like Pennsylvania, right, and which Philadelphia and Michigan and all that. We know all the time there's fraud and there's chicanery. At what point are we accepting that? Like, I also asked another question: how much illegal FBI activity is cool for you? Like, how much is cool? Like, how many illegal FISA warrants are you willing to accept? And whatever side you're on, if you're really a legitimate person that isn't just about power, and I think we see now that the left is really about power. If you're a legitimate liberal, left-wing person, like fighting the man, how come you're cool with that? How come you're cool with tampering evidence? Is it because you want that guy gone? Well, then don't talk to. I have enough. More and more, I'm finding less in common with people that I thought I would be able to talk to and say, hey, are you cool with this? Would you be cool if this was done to you? And they just go, yeah, but Trump. I mean,
no, they can't think that way. They're such psychopaths. It's like every single time a left-wing person finds the movie on Amazon, they don't just skip it. They have to tweet at Amazon, how can you let this propaganda be on? This must be banned. They're all little fucking Nazis. Like, they're such little Nazis. I mean, the thing that freaks me out is that we always say, amongst this group, certainly you guys know, we always say, they always accuse us of what they themselves are doing. That's the classic thing that the left does. But doesn't it? I didn't realize how serious it was going to be when they kept accusing us of being fascist Nazis. I was like, that's a little far. They're really wound up, like, you know, whatever. And you're like, oh, it's because they intend to be fascist Nazis as soon as they get into power. Whoa. Oh, fuck. Oh, this is real. Okay, yeah, like we really are going to the gulag. Like, got it. Like the way that they want to tell on their neighbors, but they're like, I noticed that the person in this apartment wasn't wearing a mask, and like, it's like their parents never got that in their head that that's the most un-American thing you can do. And this it's so rotten. Anyway, sorry again.
It's like
I'm just doing group therapy here. I'm just black. Like, we're not even like sorry.
It's what this show is. It's catharsis, you know.
Yeah.
Which is you know, hard to come
by. What we're seeing though is decades by design of indoctrination, where you have people now leaving a university or even high school and elementary school and you know, primary school, learning that America is bad, it's a racist place, and all these other things, and like and so no one should be surprised at what we're seeing right now. And it's just, you know, and it was funny because people were talking all along, oh yeah, what are you talking about, communists are infiltrating?
I know, dude. I know. I have been since
McCarthy is right. Is the T-shirt? It's got to become the new Roger Stone did nothing wrong. McCarthy was right. Like,
well, Lisa, you're friends with Ann, and I've been on Red Eye with Ann a bunch of times and gotten drunk with her, sort of. Ann, you weren't drunk. It was me. But like
you haven't been drunk with Ann?
Yeah, I have. But she's fantastic. But I mean, didn't she wrote a book about the whole McCarthy thing, about how he was right. He was right.
Speaking of people that were right, Anne was right. Anne was right about everything. And I feel I worked in the Trump administration. I worked in the White House on the immigration portfolio at one point. Holy shit, Anne was right. It's one of those things where like I tried to just stay like not totally black pilled and stay in the red pill zone, but like, oh my God. I mean, I love her. She's I've always said like my life goal is to be the Jewish brunette Anne, but it's not really my destiny, but I love her, but she's every time I've ever interacted with her, she like she's been like really mean, and I still love her and I love it. She's like the only person who I'd be like, yes, please talk down to me more. You're such a goddess.
Ollie North yelled at me one time. I was probably like 20 years old. I had just gotten into listening to Rush and getting into talk radio. And so I was just decided to call into Oliver North's show one day. And I had never called into a radio show before. So, you know, you get patched through, and he's like, Brett, you're on the air, you know. And I'm like, hey, Oliver. I'm like, hey, Colonel North, how's it going? And he's like, if you don't know, sir, you haven't been listening. You know, click. Next caller. I mean, I was just like, oh. I mean, just ejected, total ejector seat. Didn't have any time for that. But at the same time, I loved it. I was like, it's like I have pride. I have pride that Ollie North like yelled at me. I can say that. It's so awesome.
Yeah, you know, I remember when I met Anne, I was trying to tell her, like, it was, we were so introduced by somebody and they were like, yeah, she works at the White House. And I was like, I got to tell you what's going on with this immigration thing. Like, there's this, you know, you're right about this. And like, I wanted to give her all this. Like, I was like, you got to like harp on this person. And she's like, I know all this shit. I don't even care about that. She's like, I don't fuck them. Fuck this shit.
Hey,
no, but we gotta save America. Like, we're gonna do it together.
She's like, whatever, dude. I got
get out of my face. And I'm like, but I just loved it. I was like, that's just bring me more, just more Ann Coulter abuse. Like, give it to me.
You got roasted by Ann.
Yeah. I'm fine with it. Love it.
She's actually, you know what though? She's she was so kind to me. We had so many, and when you get her laughing, her laugh is so infectious. Like we had such fun on film doing Red Eye, but then we went across the street to the Irish bar and started drinking. She's really, really fun to be around. I mean, I had people have said that. I'm like, she's actually a really cool chick. I think.
Well, that's why she's was, you know, frequently on with Bill Maher,
those were some of the best cultural moments ever. Her on Real Time.
Yeah, and the old politically incorrect as well.
Right.
Well, the best one ever, if you look it up, And like I talked to her about it, and she was just like, it was the highlight of my life. She was on Jay Leno with George Carlin,
Oh,
and she said something, and George Carlin goes, that's funny. And for George Carlin to tell you you're funny, it's like, okay, I can die now.
You're done. Yeah, you're done and seen.
high compliment. Yeah, high compliment. That's awesome. Hey, let's talk about Good Pillow. Let's talk about David Camera Hog, as I like to call him, or Hog Boy. So
You're
I
being
just want this dude to learn how to spell. Is that too much to ask? You're in Harvard, bro.
Well, it starts at home, and they spelled his last name wrong. So what can you do?
Can we start calling him Pillow Bro now? Would that be good? Aside from maybe Camera Hog and Pillow Bro.
Well, what's so funny is like the last thing you want to think about when you're thinking about a pillow is being woke. You want to be very opposite. It's like, to me, the most obvious thing.
Something I was thinking about earlier today. Just
unwoke pillow.
Lisa, that is freaking gold right there. Oh my God.
I did an SJW handbook because I think of these things.
It's it's confusing branding, frankly. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, how does this work? But he basically just decided, I guess, like last week or something, to just create a pillow company to compete with Mike Lindell, because he doesn't like Mike Lindell. He doesn't like My Pillow.
Is it about Mike Lindell? Like, what is the obsession with Mike Lindell? Like, why is this kid even paying attention to somebody who only advertises on right-wing networks? And like, why is Mike Lindell like so offensive to these people?
I think a lot of it's
left-wing money behind it, I'm sure.
Well,
I mean, people are just propping up this kid.
Well, they want to. It's not just enough to cancel Mike Lindell to the point where he can't do business anywhere other than Fox News, Newsmax, and Sell Direct. They've got to eliminate any other options he has as far as making a living. That's the same with Hasbro doing the same with the toy line with Gina Carano. Right. It's also what happens when Amazon Prime denies you access, for your movies or Netflix. No, you can't be on this. Yeah, you can't be on this platform, so it just limits your exposure, to the masses. Basically, that's what I see going on here. This is just kind of like a woke assassination of Mike Lindell, because they don't like him. And David Hogg, and this is also David Hogg just loves the camera. He's a sociopathic kid. He loves the adulation. I look at this guy and he's like this emasculated. His arms are like little twigs, and he's got those giant, like Joan Crawford caterpillar eyebrows, and I'm just like, what is the deal with this dude?
But it's not just him. I mean, anybody can be a camera hog on their own. There's like a network of people that for some reason have identified him as good for their cause.
Yeah. Well, doesn't his dad work for CNN? His dad works for some news network. I thought it was CNN, or was a producer.
No, you're right. He's clearly like a propped up, like they always pick these like things that personify
a culture book. A culture book, yeah.
And it's like,
because you can't attack a kid. You can't attack that was almost shot at.
Right.
And he wasn't even there, right? Like he was like, I was on my bike, and then.
Yeah, he's the AOC of Parkland.
I was just going to say, he's like AOC, and she's straight out of Central Casting. Literally, they cast her, which is incredible. And I always like to remind people that, AOC only won by, I think it was 15,000 votes when she beat the incumbent. And we were talking about incumbents earlier. I mean, 99% of the time these incumbents get reelected. These 7 Senate Republicans. Obviously, people need to think differently when they go into the voting booth next time. But AOC is a good example that you can throw these people out even when they're second in line to Nancy Pelosi.
And like the left knows how to do this, because the left understands culture, again, Hollywood, media, and the
storytelling.
Yeah, like when you have the AOC thing is such a perfectly constructed creature for this moment, where it's like you can put her on the young girls' fashion magazines and then infect the politics in through that. You can say, oh, she was working as a waitress and then this, or bartender, whatever. It's like, it's this Cinderella story, and it's like, oh, but it's politics. It's not about growing up and getting married and like finding your Prince Charming. It's about the magical thing that happens is that you get elected to public office, and then you're like, doing that.
Every girl's dream.
Every
Girl
girl's
power.
dream. Which is
It's funny. You said the word. I was going to say it before, and it's actually we're great minds think alike. You're talking about construction. We were talking about Hogg and everybody. They are constructs. You have to understand it. They are constructs. Barack Obama was a construct, right?
We can do that too. My problem with a lot of this stuff is the right likes
we
to
do that
complain
too.
about it, where it's like, oh, they use audio visuals to their benefit. Oh, they're really good at. Oh, the best one is when they whine about Ben Rhodes having an echo chamber on foreign policy in the press, and you're like, you mean he did his job as a comms director, right? Like that's like anyone could do that. Like I do, it would be harder, but like we could try. But that's
you're right.
The right can do the same thing. We should be cultivating young, attractive, smart, actually smart, ideologically fringe, but like something we want to bring into the mainstream. We could be doing that. Like we could be doing that with candidates, doing that with pundits. We could be doing, but meanwhile, we've got, we're sitting there still listening to people like Karl Rove. Like, anyway.
The most important thing that you just said was cultivating. And what happens is we do see somebody who has a good, I don't want to name any names because I don't really know any of them personally, but they'll have a good campaign ad, or they look different than the traditional conservative white man. And we immediately shoot them up. We don't know anything about them. We don't know anything about their district, whether or not they'll do well. And then we just make ourselves into victims again because we're not cultivating in between elections. We're just seeing some viral video and then
that's a good point. That's a good point.
Great hope, and then that's the end.
Yeah, we can't organize. It extends even beyond. Yes, we got to put the time in, cultivate these people over decades. I mean, like that's what the left is doing. Like these characters will be here forever, and like when you look at Barack Obama, how he was created from start to finish, like it's such a long process. And there's a reason they do that. Yeah, we've got to do that. We've got to find and develop the right people. And it's the same with putting the energy in between the elections. It's like every time there's somebody was saying this at the Claremont conference the other day. Every time there's an election and something bad happens, we're like, we really got to invest in culture. The right has got to invest in culture. And they say that and they say that and they try one or two things and they're like, oh, here's this money to this. And then they forget about it and they're just like, oh, wait, but we've got candidates, like back to regular politics. Yeah. They just forget about it completely. Yeah. I mean, we've got, again, it's, the seed is the seed.
And Andrew Breitbart said, every 2 to 4 years, basically they say, you've got to. Everybody goes to the billionaires, and the millionaires, and they say you've got to funnel money into these states, or we're gonna lose the republic, And then, but at the same time, it's kind of like, okay, fine, but why didn't we invest in a movie studio 20 years ago? Why didn't we invest in a TV studio? Why aren't we doing multimedia? Why aren't we creating content?
Well, and we can do both because we also need to. Yeah, I mean, they do both. Why can't we do both?
Exactly.
We're the rich ones, right?
They all love to say.
Where's our money? Where's our? I mean, granted, look, I've been lucky. We privately raised funds for the plot against the president. We're doing the same thing for the next. We've got a slate of 3 to 5 movies in the next 2 years. Like that, we're building out the company that we did Plot Against the President as a 24/7 churning production company, and it's like we're putting the work in to make that happen. And I don't want to be one of these people that's sitting here like, why isn't everybody just giving me money to make stuff? Like, whatever. But there should be many of that. There should be. Again, we shouldn't be fighting with each other, and there should be more than that. And it should be. It shouldn't be pulling teeth when people are used to donating money to campaigns and seeing it evaporate into thin air versus investing in something that's actually going to turn a profit.
Well, and you actually create something that not only has long-lasting, it will transcend time. People will watch it over the course of many years, and at the same time, it's affecting the culture. It's affecting the way people think, and you get to turn a profit.
Right.
I mean,
that's like, oh, we're all entrepreneurs on the right. Like,
right.
Guess what? I've got a massive audience. Like, I am basically at this point where I am only the amount of content that my team can make is only limited by how many hours I have in the day to train the other producers and to like get projects like going. Like,
right.
It's an audience where you're just like, wait, so you're telling me the left is going to leave this audience and their money just sitting there and they're not going to make content for them and they're just going to leave all of those options on the table, I will come and take them. Like, fine, like, let me, you won, you twisted my arm, Hollywood. I will go and do it. Like, it's so dumb. It just, it's amazing.
Well, I mean, I do the same thing. I've, had private investors with Clinton Cash, with one other graphic novel. I had private Hollywood investors, and now we're doing the crowdfund stuff, which is great. But at the same time, what I need someone to do is come in and cut a check so I can do a slate of 5 to 6 graphic novels in 1 year, rather than doing these onesie twosies thing. What I need to do is put a bunch of conservative artists to work.
All in one thing. And it divides the risk. And I mean, frankly, that's how Hollywood is naturally structured, is you're not supposed to invest in project by project. You're supposed to be able to spread the risk around on different kinds of projects.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I think we're in a good, not to be like my one not black-pilled moment is that actually I think we're in a really good place for that. Like, I think
it's better than it was when you and I started talking in 2016, and I was just sending you a copy of Clinton Cash for the first time.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So it's much different. I mean, from my standpoint, I have American printers now lined up. I don't have to go to a publisher anymore. I can ship and distribute through Iconic Comics. So we're not sharing a profit with a publisher who's basically a glorified printer.
Yeah.
We're getting we'll be getting 80% of the profits back. 20% goes to shipping and distribution. But and you go direct to the customer now. I mean, and if you want, you could set up an Amazon store. I mean, if you wanted to, frankly, and just do shipping and fulfillment yourself, so they're not taking a huge cut. But there's so many ways to go to the 75 million voters out there who are all potential customers. They have money. They want to be entertained. They want content, and we can put all of our values and our messages and all of our ideas into great stories for them, affect the culture, and make a profit, turn a profit, make money. I mean, this is, that's why I laugh at these conservatives. It's like, you guys talk about free markets. I'm a free market.
Here it is.
It's like, well, here it is. Yeah, exactly. Cut me a check and let's go create something that's tangible, make a difference, and make some money and have a good time at the same time. Because frankly, whenever I get clients who have never made a comic book before, and I've got one right now, it's a blast. They have such a good time because they see all the artwork come in, and they see the script, and then they see the thumbnails, the black and whites, and then the color, and then the lettering, and then the cover, and then it all comes together. And
we need to resurrect what we were going to do.
I want to do that.
We'll talk offline.
I was thinking, Amanda, when Brett said you were going to come on, I was thinking about Conan, I love that movie. And I grew up, I've read all of Robert E. Howard's Conan stories. And by the way, if you're interested he wrote great horror stories too, like Lovecraftian things. He was a contemporary with H.P. Lovecraft, and they had a lot of correspondence, and they actually they respected each other's work. But I was thinking about why Conan was such a good thing for your father, because when you look at Conan, kind of like your dad, I mean, I've never met him, but I've read about him, and the dude was Conan. It was a lot of paradoxes. Like he could be ultra violent, but he could be incredibly gentle and actually nurturing. He could be ruthless, but also be benevolent. And he was constantly struggling with those things in all of his stories. And then he was always fighting against he was a soldier, and he was just a freebooter, and he was a pirate, and then he became a general, which was a pain in the ass for Conan. He was like, oh man, I got to do that. And then he became, then he took over Aquilonia. He became the king of Aquilonia. And guess what? It sucked.
Yes.
He was sitting on the last frame of your dad's saying, he's sitting on the troubled throne. And the thing was, it's like guys like Milius had to deal with, they come in and they create, and they punch and they kick and they get their way, and then they're just like, this sucks. I have to be, you know what I mean? Like, you're surrounded by all these forces pushing and pulling you, and you never really find satisfaction. And Conan used to, in the stories too, he always longed for the day to just say F this and go back to doing what he was doing as kind of independent mercenary for hire. It was just kind of interesting, because I think it seems like when I read about some of the stuff with your father and definitely his movies, that was kind of the kind of guy he was too. Like, free spirit, kind of sometimes hard to get a handle on. Like he would be this way and then another way, right? And then it's just sort of the same kind of cat, you know?
Yeah,
well,
I think
to bring it back to what you were just talking about, though, I think when you're talking about being creative and get the $100,000 checks, creative people don't want to deal with what the $100,000 checks want to tell you to do. And so it's like kind of the same thing in that you have to sign some things away.
Yeah, there's a give and take. You never get everything you want. I had to give up some stuff on Clinton Cash, very little, but the stuff that I had to kind of give up on, I was fighting with them about a couple frames. Regnery had come at me because I had a frame with the Keystone pipeline, and there's all the tubes of the pipeline, and there's two moose, and they're humping. Like one's mounting the other. So Regnery comes back and they say, we want to change that. That makes us really uncomfortable. And I'm sitting here thinking, I've got a frame in here that has a mass grave with like chopped up baby parts, which is from a Rwandan storyline. And like, this is what they have a problem with. So I bitched and moaned about it. And then I remember one of the guys, I think it was Dan Fluette, said, he goes, dude, just change it. He goes, we got to get this published. He's like, is this the hill you want to die on? And I was like, no. So I went back to my artist and I just said, just have those two moose, their asses sticking straight at the camera, because that's me telling Regnery to kiss my ass. And that's what went into the book. And then we had to change some other things. We had a Dr. Seuss parody, which looked like just like exactly like Dr. Seuss. And it was Dr. Seuss and the Lorax talking about the pipeline. And it's like in this Dr. Seuss world with the pipeline going through it. And they said, that's too close. We're going to get sued. And I said, well, Mad Magazine and Cracked, they do parodies all the time. It's how do they get away with it? Why can't we do it? And plus, there's shit tons of parodies in this. I got the Flash, Bill Clinton dressed as the Flash and running around. And they were just, and again, it was just kind of like, do you want to die on this hill? And I had to call Chuck, and I'm like, we got to change this. So we turned it into, and it was all rhyming with the Dr. Seuss stuff. It was all rhyming dialogue. So we turned the Clintons into 80s rappers. And it actually ended up being kind of a funnier joke. But I mean, you never get exactly what you want. But at the same time, I think if you're probably from a creative standpoint, if you're somewhere between like 70 to 80% getting what you want, you're in pretty good shape. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the trade-off. And I mean, that's going to be the tension. I think when we see a lot more of this conservative media coming out, which, like I said, I think we're about to have this content renaissance. People are going to have to learn what it's like to negotiate with money, to negotiate creativity versus money. And the one thing I will say that my dad was really good at with that is recognizing that and not being precious about creativity. Like he said, look, if I'm going to get paid to be a creative, I'm going to treat it like digging a hole. If the guy who hires me to dig a hole says, don't dig it over there, dig it over there, I'm not going to fucking cry about it. I'm going to go dig it where he wants to dig it, because that's what I do. And to counter that, he also would bring a gun to the meeting with the executives that were telling him to change the script and be like, yeah, like this gun is loaded. Now tell me your notes. And shit like that. So he wasn't exactly like really open to,
interviews as well. John would have a load of 45.
So my whole thesis is right. He was kind of Conan-ish, Mr. Milius.
Yeah, I think it was a very personal. That movie was particularly personal for him. That and Big Wednesday, I think, are like. I mean, they're all pretty personal. He was pretty good at.
But your brother said he spent an inordinate amount of time on that script of Conan, and I've heard that that's John's favorite part of the movie making process is the script writing. From what I understand from some of the people on Red Dawn in these extras, not the happiest to get up early in the morning for.
No, he's so disengaged in a way as a director. Like I absolutely did not learn directing style from him. Like I mean,
but he does surround himself with really good people.
Yeah, he's already made the movie mentally in his mind. Like he when we was doing Rough Riders, which is the only thing I was alive for him. Like I was born after most of his movies. But when he was doing Rough Riders, he would like go to craft services for lunch. Like he would start the day at craft services and get barbecue and like mill around and then like finally get to an action scene like later after like it was just like he was not like he's not like a method director, but he was really good. Like he just straight up did it. I mean, it was more the movie was created in his mind ahead of time, but but yeah, no, he was a little bit more, checked out. But like I do think that that the problem with so I agree that Conan is a really personal thing for him, and it was like I feel like I was raised by Conan, like the values and the movie though, and my brothers feel the same way. My brothers and I have this really personal attachment to Conan the Barbarian, but what we try to explain to people is it's not like we were raised by like the father and child sentiment in the movie. Like, he could not be more opposite of that. Like, the guy was completely checked out of our lives, like 100, like just zero. Like, I had to like tell him I had gone to college. I was like, hey, like, just FYI, like, I live in New York now, and like, I know, like,
that's crazy.
So, like, I mean, granted, that's a little bit of an exaggeration.
I get it.
Like, for shooting and stuff like that, like all the time. But he was really, really not like sitting down and being like, the value of loyalty, you must learn. We learned all of our actual values from his movies, not from
that's so interesting.
Yeah, because there's such a code among John's work.
Yeah. He doesn't live by that code. That's the thing, is everybody's like, yeah, your dad, he's so honorable, and he's just like, this really stands for family, and like the Conan sword, and like the myth of the sword, and like and you're like, yeah, he promised that sword to us and like 3 different like collector dealers, and he sold it like 3 times.
Yeah, like, but I see it as more like
that's funny. That's funny.
The films and the ethos is what you strive for. It's not exactly that's John's a flawed guy, obviously, like all of us. We're all fallible human beings. But
I accept that. I would rather have the ethos of those movies to personally live by.
That's interesting though that you're saying though is you and your siblings. That's kind of it was the movies that that's so interesting. That because your dad was doing his whatever.
Speaking of which, I just bought this. This is the Shout Factory. This is 2017 collector's edition. Shout Factory did this. I love this this watercolor on the cover. But it's got some fantastic. There was a 2007 collector's edition that had some featurettes. Red Dawn Rising, Training for World War III, Building the Red Menace. These are all great special features on this. And then it's got another new one, which has the casting director, production designer, and the editor, Tom Noble, all interviewed. And,
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that. I have. So you just get that? I got to buy that.
Yeah, this is 2017. This is the one to buy. And so I haven't watched this film. Obviously, I watched this in '85. I was 10 years old. And, obviously, you got to put it into context. It's 1985. The Soviet Union is still, very much alive and well, but they are sort of on the descendancy. You had boomers who grew up with duck and cover and the threat of nuclear war. Terry probably remembers some of this stuff. He's old enough. And, we didn't get that as Gen Xers so much.
You suck. Go ahead.
But I remember watching this as a kid, and it sparked, it was very controversial at the time. It was regarded as kind of right-wing jingoism. I think Alexander Haig and Reagan said that they enjoyed the movie, from what I understand. And then that was used as also to like spin it into this.
Oh, that's all they needed to hear then, to hear that Reagan liked it. Right?
Well, but the interesting part about this was, for me, was the conversation that went around the kitchen table over this movie, because I had 2 brothers who were 8 and 11 years older than me, and they were having kind of a more intellectual conversation about this with my parents. I just saw a great action film at 10 years old. And I was thrilled, the score and everything. It's this rampart. But at the same time, they were all having kind of a real discussion, which was, what if there was a land invasion of America? We've never had that before. Here, I guess, Japan contemplated that. And apparently they said that's a fool's errand, because behind every blade of grass, there's a rifle. That you're never going to conquer that country, not that way. So this movie comes along and just kind of comes out of nowhere and does really well at the box office. It made money, but at the same time, it scared a lot of people, and it brought up some things that I think a lot of people didn't want to talk about at the time. We were all terrified of nukes, the MX missile, and the arms race, but this kind of brought it to Main Street America, because they filmed this up in Las Vegas, New Mexico, small town, and that was kind of the whole intent. Is what happened. It was supposed to be in Colorado, but the whole idea is what happens if this comes to, small town USA? So, and the other interesting thing is you've got the Russians and the South Americans combined, and the Russians are speaking Spanish and the South Americans are speaking Russian in the film, and it's just kind of perfect. So I watched this. I hadn't seen it in probably 6 or 7 years. It was everyone's homework. Matt watched it, but he got drunk towards the end, so you never know what he remembers. But honestly, I view this movie now as just, on the surface, it's all this action, and it's got Basil's score, which is just beautiful. But on juxtaposed against that is a very, very hardcore anti-war film, because the toll that it takes on all these people, especially Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen, the Eckert brothers, along with everybody, just grinds them down to nothing. In the beginning, they're these youthful 80s teenagers, and Jed's probably working at a gas station or something like that, because he's out of high school, and he's got a blue shirt on that looks like a service station shirt underneath his leather jacket, and he's dropping everybody off, and it's just 80s Americana, and then all of a sudden you've got troops dropping out of the skies.
Yeah, it has this very self-conscious. The thing that's great about it is it's anti-war in the sense that I think that the strong message behind it is to appreciate America's safety in the world. And to basically say, like, at the end of it, you're like, thank God for America and for the America that we live in, that this isn't the America that we live in, even though we know it could very easily be something that happens. Like, thank God that we have our sort of innocent after school jobs and our culture. It basically says appreciate Americana, right? And that's why I think it's becoming so resonant for people again right now. Like every, obviously I've been promoting the movie, but every show that I've gone on or anybody I've talked to, everybody's talking about Red Dawn. Like everyone's like, oh, I just watched Red Dawn again. And like, oh my God, like, really got to me. And it has this just really impactful nostalgia. I mean, I think even more so now because we don't even have the America that it sort of tells us to enjoy, right? Like in the beginning of their movie, like when's the last time a high school kid could survive, could be, happy and hopeful by working at the gas station and having a normal life, and small town America not being demonized in media and in culture. It's the whole thing. It's an era that we actually almost don't even have anymore.
For us too, is in special forces in the Green Berets, because if people don't know this, we're the special operations force. Our whole focus is guerrilla warfare, what we call unconventional warfare. I mean, we go to school for this shit. As a matter of fact, I have a job. I'm a contractor. I go down and I get involved with Robin Sage now down at Fort Bragg, which I went through back in like 1993, which the whole community is involved in this guerrilla warfare thing. And so Red Dawn's always been a big movie in our community because, again, what was cool about it too is that they learned it. They had to learn it. They've had to figure it out as they went. Now Powers Booth helped them, right? The pilot that got that. But what was cool, I think, for a guy like me who's been, my whole focus in the military is that kind of stuff, that kind of fighting, is that these kids, they made it happen. They made it happen, right? And they didn't. And even when they got crushed pretty bad, they didn't lie down, right? And so they kept going. And they took losses. They had bad shit happen to them. Kind of like I said, they get ground. It's a grind. But I think the fact that they keep coming back, and then you could see their minds change a little bit about what this is like. Kind of to your point of being an anti-war movie. It's not really sexy. People are gonna like get blown up in front of you. But
you're gonna have to kill your friends if they're disloyal. Like
that's. I mean, like, dude, you actually. Best. That was heavy. That was like the heaviest moment in the movie, I think, for sure. Exactly right. But I mean, for me, we love that movie in our community because it's the stuff that we.
Well, that makes my dad happy. That's his favorite part of the military is Green Berets. He doesn't stop talking about special forces. Like, I mean, this is his hobby.
Hey, you could tell him that.
Yeah, you would have to get you guys together.
Yeah, you tell him you talk to a Green Beret who actually says like that. I mean, that movie we love that movie, and we quote it and we talk about it, but for reasons why, and because again, you got a bunch of people, and to your point about Americana back then, these were kids that were tough. They were athletes.
Yeah.
They worked for a living. They kind of lived out, they weren't city dwellers. So you take these kids with no military training, but with some grit in them and some ability to. And I always tell people, what people say, what do Green Berets do? I said, well, if I had to tell you one thing, we are problem solvers. That's what we do.
American ingenuity and American drive, and it is so uniquely American.
Right.
You nailed it. That's also why I think people really love this movie. Is they're like, you don't have to be the most trained or the most anything. Even if we were the underdogs, we believe we would figure it out.
That's the point. Is you figure it out as you go.
Alone. And
they didn't quit, they never quit. They relied on each other and stuff like that. It's a great, dude. It's a great movie in my community. There's times, I'm not kidding you, dude. There's times we'd be getting ready to go on an objective. I'd be sitting there going, Wolverine.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Thank you, Mr. Milius.
So speaking of Green Berets,
his fans are all the armed forces. It's just across the board. Like anytime I meet there's even a movie that I think did fairly badly of his. It was like one of the last movies he did, which is called Flight of the Intruder, that we don't even talk about because it was like, oh yeah, that was the last time Dad had a job and that went south. But I talked to guys in the Navy that are like, everybody in the Navy knows every word of that movie.
My buddy,
it's actually not a bad movie at all.
It isn't a bad movie. Yeah.
My buddy flew the modern Intruder. It's not called an Intruder anymore, but he flew that in Iraqi. Not Iraqi. It was I forget which one it was. It was Iraqi Freedom. I think that was what it was.
The second one or the first one?
Second one.
Yeah.
Second one. He's a Rio. So he's not he's a gooseman. So he's not a pilot or a driver. But he loves that movie. And then this guy was guy used to do carrier landings. Matt was all over the place back in the day. This is a guy I used to hang out with in high school. He drove a 79 Vet. But speaking of Green Berets, the cast of Red Dawn was put through a 2-week boot camp by a Green Beret who's a friend of your dad's named Fred Wexler.
I didn't know that.
Fred, are you sure it's not Fred? What's his last name again? I think it's Rexer.
Maybe it's Rexer. Okay.
Yeah,
he was a special forces guy.
Dude was a demolition expert.
He's in the movie as well. He's sitting on top of the tank with the blue.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to look that up. Yeah,
he's the guy that draws. He draws the knife and goes after Jennifer Grey at the gas station, and that's when she runs through the field.
That's the special forces guy. Oh,
and then all the guys, and then Jed and everybody pop up out of the little foxholes that they had made, and they gun them all down.
I love that scene.
Oh,
no, that's
classic.
Thing, that he did, which was pretty cool. So my dad just by persona, he got along with stuntmen. With the armory guys, obviously because they're all ex-military, and with the military training folks,
the advisors.
We would work with the stunt folks and all that. So that's his core group of friends. Like one of his best friends in the whole world is Terry Leonard, who's this very, very well-known stunt man. He did the stagecoach horse stunt in Indiana Jones. He did all horse work in all my dad's other movies. But so these are the guys that he was actually friends with, and what he would do is he would always give all of his buddies a role in the movie. Like he was constantly putting friends in, like Uncle Frank. This fellow is the teacher at the beginning that walks out. All of these guys were buddies of his, and
that's cool.
The big version of that is him insisting that Arnold Schwarzenegger be Conan, and that Jerry Lopez, who was one of his good friends, be in that. Like the whole thing had.
Jerry's a surfer. I mean,
he really got this thing that I really appreciate of working with non-actors and working with first-time actors and working with unknown actors, and then these people became huge stars. So like. Contrary to my being like, he was a little bit, not the most, involved auteur director. I mean, he really was. Like performance did actually really, he had a way of working with people that he was able to get amazing performances out of non-actors, which is.
That's cool.
I'm really into that. Like I will never hold a candle, obviously, in the fiction department. But when I did fiction, that was the thing I like to do. I like to work with first-time actors or non-actors. Like,
Right.
I think it's just really fun. And
a good director, a certain kind of director can pull that shit off.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain kind of director to make those folks feel comfortable and that they can do it and not make them feel like, oh, yeah.
Those are the kind of people he wants to hang out with. He doesn't want to hang out with the Hollywood crowd. He wants to hang out with the demolition expert, ex-Green Beret, who's blowing shit up out there in the thing. And he's like, oh yeah, let's see if we can do this to the bridge or whatever. Like, I mean, that's what he wants.
Yeah. That's cool. I didn't know that.
He's playing like toys and tanks with his movies. I mean, that's like what he's doing.
You know, something else that I was thinking about with this movie was, you know, and we were talking about it a minute ago. There's a scene where they finally get up into the mountains and they know kind of what's going on down in the town. And Jed says, "Look, you know, Matt and I have been coming up here for a long time. You know, with our dad. We can hunt, we can fish, we can trap, we can stay up here a long time, and we can survive and we can thrive up here." And they're kind of like, well, how long do we do that? You know, and these jets go over by, and he's like, so we don't hear that anymore. But the thing is, they could have stayed up there, but they didn't.
Right.
Yeah,
They had to go back into town. They had to, okay,
and take it to them, and take it to the bad guy.
Yeah, exactly. And why is that? Because
we live here.
That's right. And that's right. And also because this country was born out of revolution.
We live here.
You were talking about how it might not play. Maybe it would play a little bit in Britain, but they lambasted the film, especially over there. The critics
They're not going to get it. Not understand this movie. That's why we're not Europeans.
Exactly. And that's why it's that there's that great scene where Darren swallows the bug, you know, and Patrick Swayze's about to kill him. He's got his pistol drawn up, and Charlie Sheen is saying, you know, he's starting to break. He's starting to finally say, what's the difference between him and me? You know, because you look at him and it's this 20-year-old Russian kid. And the Russians in the movie were real Russian. They were Russian exchange students that were pulled from the university at Las Vegas, New Mexico. They had this pool of Russian exchange students for some reason.
Amazing.
And they're all these baby-faced soldiers, you know, and that's where that line comes from. What's the difference? You know, and Patrick Swayze's like, because we live here, you know, and then he can't kill him though. And that's when Tommy Howell comes up and just guns him down with the AK.
Yeah.
You know? And it was like 20 below in that scene, apparently, up on like Jackson's Mesa. And he said they were all getting frostbite. Patrick Swayze's got frostbite. Everybody got a little bit of frostbite on that shoot. But the thing that kind of interested me about that was John says he spent about 2 years living in the mountains in Colorado as a kid, and he would fish, hunt, and trap.
Wait, my dad?
Yeah, that's what he said.
Here's again, we gotta separate myth from. This is what's so awesome about my dad is my dad will tell you that he was a mountain man, that he lived by barefoot in this. Okay, we went to the same boarding school. It was a boarding school for unruly children. And it happened to exist long enough that he went there. I also got sent there. I did not do nearly as well. But he really thrived at this Colorado boarding school where you would do, back then it was way more rugged, right? It really, to be fair, it was pretty rugged. It was way more rugged than any way that I intended.
Where in Colorado is this?
It's in Steamboat Springs.
Okay. Yeah, I grew up there in Littleton in the 80s. So
yeah, exactly. Like it's you know, it's a great school, great neighborhood, great. I mean, it's like on its own in the mountains. It is like its own little thing. But so when he says he lived in the woods with
his friends, he'd go up there with his friends and they would hunt and trap and fish.
But that was at boarding school. Like meanwhile, when he came home for the holidays, he was going back to his parents, my grandparents, like multi-million-dollar Bel Air estate. Like there's a little bit that I kind of can't with him with the like I'm a mountain man thing, because
every writer embellishes
massive trust fund than any of us ever will, and you were like. He's like, yeah, well, you know, I just wasn't going to compromise. Like, I'm going to be a writer and I'm going to do this and that. I'm like, yeah, because you didn't have to get a fucking job, did you? Like, yeah. He said in
this interview.
Like if I turned to my dad and I was like, yeah, just so that I can be uncompromising in my filmmaking, I'm going to go ahead and not work anymore. Like, I'm not going to, I don't need a job. Like, they would laugh me out the door. They'd be like,
Right.
what do you think you are? Like,
He said, it's funny in this interview, he said, he'd go up there with his friends, and and it's just so funny because it's so John. He said, we were promised that the Russians would come.
yes.
And therefore all of society would break down. And we would have to fight the Russians in the mountains with our Kaplock rifles and live in the mountains and just hole up there. And
you hear how bad he wants that. And I completely relate to that. And I think so many people relate to that. When I say, can we hurry up and get to the hot war part of this civil war we're clearly in, so that at least I can participate while I'm still young enough to do it? Like, I really mean that. And it's so many people, I think, and the reason, like I said, not to give him a hard time. The reason I point out the fact that he romances this idea of, like, I was a mountain man and I didn't have this cush family situation is because I actually think that's part of what makes him able. It's kind of more awesome. Like, he went to the mountain man side because he rejected this yuppie prep school, ultra preppy, he could have been one of these sort of like wealthy, semi-elite like brats, but he chose to say no to that and to reject that wholeheartedly and to go after this more authentic experience. And I know he kind of covers that up because he's embarrassed by it, but I actually think it's a really good quality. And it kind of makes
the story a little bit interesting, though, doesn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, what you just read, that longing for adventure and that longing to just fight our enemies in the open, I completely, I feel like that's really, a lot of people relate to that right now.
I was on the phone with Cersei yesterday, and we were talking about this, and he hadn't seen Red Dawn in a while, so that was one of the reasons why he's a little hesitant to drop in today. He's like, I haven't done my homework, and so he's like, I don't know if I'm going to show up. But I said, dude, the one of the things I was thinking about was, when would we be susceptible to a land invasion? It certainly wasn't in the 80s, because you got all of those Gen X kids and boomers who were still of fighting age. My parents were in their 40s. They're my age in the 80s. So let's go to the end of the Gen Xers. And then we've got an even more, let's just say that we keep going down this road of emasculation of the American male. Because now we've got the military who are doing stand down orders and looking at people's social media and seeing if they're radicalized Trump supporters in the media. I mean, or in the military. This is scary stuff. But I'm sitting here thinking to myself, 10, 15 years down the road, and we got a bunch of just pure soy boys who, order their avocado toast from DoorDash in the morning and, rub their beard oil in, don't know how to change a tire, never held a gun. Their significant other probably has more muscle mass than they do because they're on transitional hormones. When would we say this. Terry, when would we be susceptible to something like that, if not then?
And I do think societally, especially in a lot of the urban environments, the more it goes this way, you have people who are completely not self-reliant, who don't know really anything about, and I'm not saying that as a talking down thing. There's things they can do that I can't do. But I mean, if you put them out into a rugged environment where they've got to get food and water,
right,
and, organize an ambush or a raid or just live, they're going to be challenged.
They're not going to survive.
You're going to have a very steep learning curve.
The bad guys know that. Like, the closest thing that we have to the Red Dawn moment, I would actually say, is right now, where you basically have China intelligently knowing you cannot just outright attack and take over America. Sure. You have to just buy your way in through their politicians.
Yep.
All you need to do is control this little tiny elite class and you control the whole country.
Yeah.
Except for what you're talking about, which is that the military and their patriotism and the military class is one of the hardest things that the bad guys they haven't been able to perfectly overcome it yet. It's one of the only institutions in the United States that is still respected by both sides and still has any
but they're working on it. They're working on
it. And that's why it's so freaky to see what they're doing with the thousands of troops that are ideologically aligned with the ruling minority in DC, and that they're stationed outside of all of our government buildings. And the fact that they're trying to do this on a wider scale of ideologically purifying the military class is the most like historically fucked thing that has ever happened.
That's a good point. One quick thing about this too. It isn't even just military people. One of the reasons why they want to destroy the culture that you saw in Red Dawn in the 80s is because those people, by the nature of the kind of lives they live, can solve problems. They are tough. They're
football, okay. My dad has always said this, and we were a football family. Him and his brothers played football. The American football culture connection with
our warrior culture. It's a warrior sport.
It is absolutely important, and there's a reason. That's a reason that they went after the NFL, and the reason that they wanted. Remember when they were constantly going after football for kids and saying they can't play it because it's too dangerous, and they're going to do that again. But the football military connection is so important and huge, and
it prepared me. I've talked about this on different shows and stuff. The thing with football, which I think was it set me up for success in the military, was whether it's, like I said, even through the small college program I played at. First of all, football is a team, right? Everybody's got to show up. Everybody's got to practice, and you can't. One thing about if you play a team sport, or if you're in the Green Berets, or if you're doing this, you can't hide. You can't hide on a team. The guys know quickly who's not pulling their weight, who's not working hard. So you have a team, you have strategy, you have to do preparation, reconnaissance. You got to watch films. How do we beat these guys? And then it becomes physically violent on the game day, where you are imposing your will on your enemy. And variables come in. Lucky stuff comes in. Someone catches a lucky pass. Now the emotional tide's gone this way, and now you've got to counter that with some other kind of move. It really is a microcosm of combat.
Which is why in Red Dawn, the wherewithal to have the team and they're fighting, and their group to be called the Wolverines, the same as their football team, is so brilliant.
That's exactly right. Yeah, but that culture. So they're already trying to destroy the military culture with all of this social justice stuff, and that's pretty effective. I mean, we just had. Look at the Secretary of Defense we just put in, and look at the stuff that he wants to do. Okay, This is not this isn't like me. But the other thing is too. There's guys out there that are tougher than me and are better survivors than me. Never spent a day in the military, but most those guys are in the middle of the country. They live in rural environments, and they get up and they fix tractors, and they do stuff, and they hunt. Those people have to be singled out and destroyed by this left-wing machine, because those are the people that you're going to have a hard time conquering.
That's what happens in the movie when Powers Booth comes in. They have that campfire scene. What's interesting about this movie also is it was shot sequentially. So from the very first shot to the end, it's all shot sequentially.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool. Yeah.
And the idea was to wear them down, wear them down towards the end. The last night of shooting, it was 40 below, and that's where
they're pretty smoked by then. Yeah,
big time. And what's amazing in those last shots, there is this. It's real snow. And it's like this crazy snow they call the White Death out there in New Mexico, and it's sparkling. It's this weird, iridescent sparkle. It's so bizarre, and it's one of those things where when you're on a shoot, it just happens, and it's like one of those happy accidents. As an artist, you live for those things. But when Powers Booth comes in, he becomes kind of the father figure. He hones their skills. They already kind of knew how to run. Jed runs, Matt flanks, Tommy's in the back. Ride and drag, but he hones their guerrilla tactics. But what's interesting about that campfire scene is he says that they use tactical nukes on the West Coast to take out certain cities, and then they have a land invasion, which they stop them at the Rockies. And then you've got tactical nukes on the East Coast in Washington, and I think a couple other places. They had charter flights of enemy soldiers come into the Midwest to cause havoc. But what happens is they stop them at the Rockies. They stop them basically kind of at the Mississippi, and then they come up to the southern border and cause all kinds of havoc in Texas. And they stop them cold, like in the Dakotas. So what happens? The flyover country, the middle of America, comes to the rescue of America. All the other cities fall. And the thing is, what he says is they they're not going to use any more tactical nukes because they want the land. They want
to take the ship. That's what.
And they also want the breadbasket, which is the middle, the middle of the country, which feeds largely all of America and the world. But I was just sitting here thinking to myself, oh, and then the other thing they said, he says, well, who's on our side? And he says, 6 million screaming Chinamen. And he goes, and then Daryl says, weren't there 1 billion screaming Chinamen? That's when he throws the booze into the fire and it goes, Psh! And he's like, not anymore. He's like, there were. So they nuked China. But basically, I just see a scenario that could unfold tomorrow, if with regard to the heartland of this country largely rising up, because those are the people in rural America who are problem solvers, who are talking about they can go up and live in the woods and be self-sufficient. They're armed to the fucking teeth.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other nice thing. So,
and yet, isn't it interesting now? As a rule, generally in the United States, those people are roundly mocked.
Well, they're called
roundly mocked. They're roundly mocked and insulted and called, knuckle dragging white supremacist. There's a reason why they're attacking them that way, because they are a threat.
Well, now we've gone from Nazis, like we talked about. We went from racist, bigoted, misogynistic homophobes to Nazis to now, now we're really dissenters, but they're calling us. Terrorists. They're comparing us
to. That's the goal. That's the goal. The next step after the Patriot Act was always the goal. And they want a one-party country. Like they don't. That's what's so gross about their throwing around the word.
Wasn't David Koresh basically kind of like a domestic terrorist? And I'm sitting here. As a Gen Xer,
I don't like David Koresh has always been a real heartthrob of my childhood.
Well, here's something else real quick, and then I got to get going. But I wanted this. This is interesting because you just brought this up with Koresh. Remember what happened to Randy Weaver too?
Yes.
Yeah. Remember this? They shot the dog. They shot the wife. Splattered her brains all over the place. And what did they accuse? What did they say? Randy, they actually leveled white supremacist accusations at Weaver, which he denied.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine,
and it's actually everybody needs to read the Randy Weaver and the Waco story again and again and again. We should be teaching it in school because it's so important. They had that Fed guy who was posing to get him to buy that sawed-off or to sell him that sawed-off shotgun or whatever the hell it was. And it's always this Fed infiltration. There's so many themes to that. And then Waco, I mean, it's
my friend, I have a friend of mine. He's a real cowboy out west, and he was a wounded. He got blown up overseas. His name is Braxton McCoy. He wrote an incredible book called The Glass Factory. I took a long time to read it because I knew
I follow that guy. He's really.
You need to read his book. It will anyway. But Braxton wrote the other day. He laid it out. He goes, remember what happened with Weaver and what the feds did, and then they accused him of white supremacy, which he denied. And he said they set the stage for what they get to do to white supremacists back then, and now they're calling us that now. Which then gives them carte blanche and license to do that stuff to us. This is not paranoid talking. This is what happens.
No, that's why it's so important to push back on it. That's why I say, even though, yes, there's some parts of the right that get a little too far out, when it's not actually indefensible crap, you have to push back on anybody that says that kind of shit. That's what's so embarrassing about how many things narrative-wise we allowed to happen under the Trump watch. As speaking as somebody that was in the administration, the shame of allowing that administration to fire Darren Beatty and call him a white supremacist is so fucking stupid and embarrassing that if we aren't going to take care of that kind of crap and put that to bed and be like, no, I'm sorry, these people are not white supremacists. They're Americans. Shut the fuck up. We have to do that. We have to push back twice as hard.
Well, that's one of the reasons Trump was elected was because, I was joking the other day when the Lincoln Project thing happened. I said, so the left is going to be angry now that they got fooled by fake Republicans for 4 years. Well, Republicans have been fooled by fake Republicans for decades. Welcome to the party, pal. You've been lied to. And I had the Bruce Willis thing with looking down the window. And I'm like, this is why President Trump was brought in, because constantly they'd get elected, they would promise things, and then they'd constantly cede territory and say, well, we can't, you got, yeah. And eventually, at some point, it is probably a good idea to fight back, to your point, Amanda, because if people are like, wow, this isn't that, really, it's not that, what is the hill to die on? What is the hill to at least fight on?
Treat them calling people irrelevantly white supremacists as though they had just said the N-word.
Exactly.
We need to freak out at that level. We need to so overreact because frankly,
that's interesting. Yeah,
you can call somebody. Like if you call somebody, like I'm Jewish, you're going to call me a fucking Nazi? Like really? Like I should be so offended because the problem is we don't get offended because like we just don't care. But if you don't react with that level of like,
they'll keep taking.
You're just going to keep going, and at a certain point, you're just like, it's become this thing where it's like okay to call Republicans Nazis and white supremacists. Like
it already is okay. It already is okay.
It reminds me of Andrew Breitbart. I think it's in Righteous Indignation, the movie, the doc, or Hating Andrew Breitbart, which is a great doc. Everyone needs to watch that. But he's talking about the Podestas basically leveling all kinds of charges. Saying you're racist, you're white supremacist, and he's like, "Fuck you."
Yeah. Yes.
Fuck you. And that's what Gavin kind of taught me was don't take that shit tell them to go fuck themselves. They're a bunch of assholes, and give it back to them. And it's one of the reasons why I love Gavin.
Lisa, do you remember on Twitter a few years ago on Twitter, there's another, I'm not going to say his name, a special forces guy. He was an officer. So of course, fuck you. But I'm just kidding. But he's kind of a left-wing guy. And he actually said some really shitty stuff about Gavin. And I went right at him. I said, dude, take that back because you don't know him. Gavin has lost all sorts of gigs. He's lost all sorts of things because he's taken a stand. You may not like the Proud Boys weren't my thing, but you may not like that kind of stuff, but do not call him a Nazi brown shirt because that's the last thing he is. And he kind of was like, fine, man. I was just like, I'm just not going to let you say that. I'm not going to let you say that about my friend.
We have to look out for each other like that. And there's a reason that they kill that, they destroy people like Andrew Breitbart, by like Gavin McInnes, by people who understand the significance of what's happening culturally and stand up for the right things and actually are effective and actually really make people think, like say what you will about like Milo Yiannopoulos. Like I've heard all kinds of drama behind the scenes of various people. I don't know him personally, whatever, but boy, did that guy get people's attention.
He had an effect.
Of everything. I mean, that's the thing is that's what pisses me off so much about a lot of the conservatives, even the folks that I know and I'm friends with, where they'll be like, wait, what do you mean you can't go on this podcast or this radio show because that person's like really fringed and they're a conspiracy theorist? And you're like, we cannot play that game. Like, no, it doesn't matter. Like when people didn't freak out over Laura Loomer getting banned off of everything from banks, from PayPal, from Ubers, from getting food delivery, from every single platform, for what? For what? Because a lot of people would be like, oh, well, and I got in plenty of fights at the White House when I was trying to help bring in the social media personalities for this summit at one point. I got in fight after fight after fight I was like, this really should just be the people that have been banned. This should be everyone that's banned, and that's it. Like, not the Charlie Kirks and, you're more vanilla conservative, like Diamond and Silk and like whatever, like people that are like on there. I was like, this needs to be a collection of the people that are banned, and that didn't happen. And there's a lot of reasons for that and whatever. But that is one of the most frustrating things about the right is that we need to push back, even if you don't agree with the style or the tactic. When they ban somebody, we need to talk about them every day.
Yeah. Well, the other thing Nick and I were talking about yesterday was, none of us are going to get thrown into actual gulags at this point. We're not going to be put on a train. We're going to be
got lists of Trump administration officials. I don't know about you all, but
we're going away, Amanda.
Hey, I work for Bannon, so I'm definitely on the list. That's for sure. But they're going to put us in virtual gulags. We're not going to be able to bank here. We're not going to be able to shop here. They're going to limit our travel. Can't do this without the vaccine or some kind of government ID. They're going to put us in a box, and it's going to be a virtual box, and it's going to limit our freedoms.
Matt Drudge said this brilliantly on InfoWars years ago, and I remember hearing it the one night that Matt Drudge did this really long InfoWars episode. And I
remember that.
So good. And he said, they're going to put you in do not let them put you in their virtual ghettos. Build your own website, have your, like the InfoWars model where they're able to at least continue broadcasting because they're not fully dependent on all the things that have kicked them off. Like, he called it. And he was so correct back then.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Hey, let's wrap it up. I wanted to, because I know, Terry, you got to go, but I wanted to end with this
big dog who's sleeping next to me right now.
I got to take mine on a hike. She's sitting here waiting patiently, like every good cattle dog does. She's waiting. Anyway,
Larry's right there. Yep.
Anyway, I got this great quote from John, which kind of encapsulates Red Dawn, and I love it. He says, "The movie touches people's desires to live free. I think everybody wants to run around in the wilderness and protect their beliefs and country. There's a streak of that in everyone, whether it's patriotism or just being hard to deal with."
God, yeah.
Well, one thing I would bring back to the movie and to that quote and the people that didn't go after or don't defend other conservatives is you also have to remember there are a group of people on both sides that really will thrive in the re-education camps.
Yeah.
And so which one do you want to be? Do you want to be the one yelling avenge me? Do you want to be the one who's like taking a stand? Or some people want to be the one that thrive in the re-education camps.
Just like Darren's dad, who was the mayor. He basically kind of stuck that out.
That's how many, to Lisa's point, how many conservatives can we think of that are totally Daryl's dad? Like, it's so Lincoln Project.
His dad stood there.
I think the ones who aren't.
But the significant thing about the mayor, about his dad, was that he stood there and watched a bunch of the parents get executed and thrown into a mass grave. And Charlie Sheen, this was Charlie Sheen's first movie, by the way.
Yeah.
Very first movie. And it was a big deal for him to be in this movie. I think Chris Penn told him about it. And everybody wanted to kind of get in on this movie. But Charlie's up on this hill and he's all decked out in this camo and he's sitting there watching. And he just and the mayor's standing there and all the parents are standing there and they all start singing "My Country 'Tis of Thee," and they start going, and then they just gun them all down. And the mayor's like, he starts to get like physically ill, and he sort of like turns around. But yeah, do you want to be that guy, or do you want to be up in the wilderness with the Wolverines, dying with honor, or at least fighting for honor? But at the same time, what do we have at the end of the film? And this is what kind of left me a little bit maybe more empty than what I had before, which is partisan rock, the rock where they write all of the names of the dead on. And basically at the end of this film, you have a monument kind of in the middle of nowhere with a plaque that no one ever visits. And that was sort of the heartbreaking thing that I hadn't picked up on watching it over the years. I picked up on that this time and I was like, wow, this is kind of anti-war. Like I love it. I still love it. Red Dawn, for my generation, is a rampart. But at the same time, the juxtaposition underneath is, this is ugly. This is the ugly stuff.
I could go both ways with it. I mean, I see what you're saying, and you definitely get this heartbreakingly sad feeling, this empty, like effectively empty feeling at the end of the movie. But the plaque, to me, still is a little bit hopeful in that it's saying they didn't die in vain. They didn't get to see the victory, but the victory happened, and America did not perish from this earth. That's like the end of the, like, so that this nation will not perish from this earth. That actually is the thing worth fighting for, whether you get to see the victory or not. And
it's a reminder that somebody picked up the fucking sword.
Well, the plaque says, it's narrated by Leah Thompson because she's one of the two Wolverines that survives at the end, and she says children fought in this war, and she's interviewed in the extras, and she said, it's my favorite movie of all time. She said it's the greatest time I ever had on a movie.
Wow.
Tommy Howell said the same thing. Tommy Howell bought everybody cowboy boots because Tommy Howell was like a ranch kid growing up, apparently. I mean, he lived it. He was the one who was on horseback, and he was good with the guns.
Oh, cool.
Patrick was also good on horseback with the guns, but Tommy like grew up on a ranch and like fantasized about shooting communists, apparently. But Leah said that this was her favorite movie, and she said something also. She said, really, it's about children fighting a war, which is who fights wars. It's usually the kids. And she said it's unfortunate, but it's also a hard fact and a hard truth. But you're right. that is, that is one thing at the end of the movie is, I remember that line. So this nation shall never perish from this earth. And they didn't get to see the victory, but everyone else benefited. It's, largely the same as my grandparents, who fought in World War II. A lot of them didn't get to see the benefit of stomping out Tojo and Nazism because they didn't make it back.
Yeah, I mean, when you die in a war, you don't know if it was for victory or not. Like,
there's one of my friends that's not coming back.
Right.
I have a bunch of these, sadly. So, guys like us are maybe a bit more emotionally invested in a lot of this than others because of that, and it's okay, but someone's got to the big thing is just don't let them do it to you. Just don't let them do it to you, man. Just don't let them do it to you because they're going to try to do it to you. They're going to try to take you down. I mean, it's happened to all of us. I've had stuff happen. People come after me, and I'm sure they've come after you. You just got to do your best to not let them do that.
Yep. Yeah. What is that? Don't let the bastards get you down. I think didn't Churchill say that? Something like that. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Political Punks.
An end to the quote from a non-American.
Yeah, right. Should have gotten a Roosevelt quote in there. That would have been better. All right, let's wrap it up. That's it for this episode of Political Punks. Thanks to everyone here. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, Lisa, give us our coordinates. Where can people find you?
On Twitter and Gab and Parler, I guess eventually. Under Lisa DEP.
Cool. All right, Mando, where can people find you on social media right now?
Instagram at my first name, last name, Amanda Milius, and Twitter at The Plot Against the President Movie, which is PATP Movie.
Awesome. Terry, give us your coordinates.
You could find me on Twitter, and I also getting ready to do another season of Hollywood Weapons. You can see that on Amazon Prime. I got a bunch of shows. They all, whatever, just me being stupid.
Big movie star. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Terry, if you do not tell me about Bruce Campbell and at least give me an invite, I will be pissed.
Yep. You're on the hook, dude, for that one.
Trust me, if I get him, you'll be hearing about it. Hey, man, it was nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you. Love you on Twitter. We're going to be buddies.
Thank you. Yeah, tell your dad that the Green Berets are big fans of that dude.
We're going to get you guys together. It'll be a riot.
We'll have some laughs.
We'll do this again. We'll get everybody back together again because this was fun. Go ahead and subscribe to Political Punks on Rumble and YouTube so you never miss an episode, and make sure to like and share this video. Until then, stay frosty, and we will see you next time.